Hi, welcome to Module 4 of the Author Your Brand series. This is called Yada Yada Yada. Module is about the content part. This is the part where most entrepreneurs and even professional writers stress on quite a bit. It's creating your content, making sure that it resonates, has pacing, style, that it reads well, and that it makes a difference when people read it, and it creates some emotion in them. That's not an easy thing to do, so we're going to get a lot of help on this module. So let's get started. Crafting a compelling message without writing a word. Here we go, folks. Finally, we're getting to the book part. Oh my gosh, Doug, you're spending 3 modules and all this preparation and purpose and passion and design and marketing. Let's get to the book. Well, this is the module to do that. Now, most people know they want to have a book done, but they don't have the time or skill to write. So we're going to talk about crafting a compelling message. I'm rarely going to use the word you write. Okay, you might have to write a blog and help out with a few things there, but the bulk of this work can be done of crafting your book, crafting your message without writing a word. There's a few processes to do this. The first one, of course, and there's advantages and disadvantages to all of these, but I'll cover them briefly. The first one is to write your own book. Just sit down at the typewriter and write your own book. There's a great PDF in this module about defeating writer's block, which I highly encourage you to read. But if you do decide to do this, you will run across times or discipline problems with getting your book written. A lot of people suggest writing a page a day, and within 200 days, you've got a nice book done. That might work. I've never seen that happen. I much think that I'm more likely to assume that entrepreneurs are busy and their schedules go back and forth. So I think blocking out several sections a week, an hour or two at a time where you're just banging stuff out works really well. You always get in the flow when you're writing, and the biggest trap people get into is editing as they write. So we'll talk about that too in one of our PDFs about effortless writing. A lot of content there about how to write your own book. We don't spend a lot of time on that because I'm assuming that 90% of you don't have time or the skill to do all that. So I'm going to talk to you about the other alternative method, which is having it written for you. The first method I've learned from a good friend of mine was to basically dictate your book. And this can work, and I'll describe to you the basic system that works really well, which is to take your book's concept, you've created an outline, and you take each chapter and write the chapter on one piece of paper and 3 bullet points, and do one of these pieces of paper for every chapter of your book. So you've got 8 chapters, 8 pieces of paper, all with a headline on top and 3 bullet points. And you actually physically tape them on a wall, get a digital recorder, and talk your book out like you're giving a speech. And you talk about your major point, 3 bullet points with a case study, blah, 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 and just talk your book out. I did my second book this way, and I got it done. I had it dictated. I dictated it, quite frankly, and I had it transcribed. I took those transcriptions, and I put it into a book format and had somebody edit it. And it was okay. It's a great way to start. You can do it pretty much yourself except the transcription. I can give you a couple resources for that. But the editing, in my opinion, it's a little flat. The reason is because you are doing a monologue. You are talking to a recorder, not to an audience, and you're having a conversation with your own mind. So you're making your points, but you're not being interviewed. You're not being questioned. There's not a conversation going on here. It's between you and yourself. So while it works, I have found that most people who are amateur writers or dictate and transcribe their books, the prose, the content, the whole message can be a little flat. A much, much better method is a professional interview-based book where you are going to hire a journalist to help you get your book out of your head. But the reason this works so well is, number one, you've got to make time for it. All right, you're scheduling these up, you're setting the times up, and you are, it's like going to a doctor's appointment. You can do it on the phone with somebody. But you schedule a time with your journalist. And the best part about this, guys, is that person, if you hire the right one, which I'll talk to you about how to do that in our premium system, but when you hire a professional journalist, they're going to ask you questions that the readers are going to want to know. When I'm sitting there talking to a recorder, I'm saying what I want to say, blah, 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 blah. But when a journalist asks me questions, well, what did that mean to you, Doug? How did that affect your family? And what happened next? They're going to drill down into your head and into your heart much deeper than you will on your own. So guess what you get at the end of that interview? you get a solid book. You get good quality transcripts created, not from your own thoughts, but from the conversation between you and a professional. So number one, your book is better, and it gets done faster than on your own. So I can't stress enough this third version of getting your book done by having a professional interview you, getting those transcribed, and then of course professionally edited. All methods work. The third one is my personal favorite. All right, so how are we going to do this? There's in your download, there's a thing called the I, why, who, why, what, which is the I, which is, let's talk about you a little bit, which is the first module. Why are you doing this? Who are you talking to? Why do they care? And what are they going to do? So when I say, this little thing here, no one cares, they don't care about you. Nobody knows you. I mean, nobody except your immediate sphere of influence. You're trying to reach brand new people who are going to pick up your book, who don't know you from Adam, and say, wow, I want to care about this guy, this gal. I care about their mission, what they're saying in the book. Why should they care? You see, if you don't position your book with a really highly tuned flavor for your reader, you're going to miss the boat. You're going to miss the point entirely. You've got to have your positioning and your purpose already set up and clearly defined before you get to the stage. And once you have that defined, we're going to put it into an outline format. And that outline will be really critical for your interviewer to get. So when you have an outline, you're going to say, okay, well, here's my idea. Here's my passion. I've talked to a lot of people. Everybody wants to answer this question. And we're going to do a book about it. Okay, great. What style will your book be? If you're like me, you read a lot of books. And they all are great. And some of them are not so great. And some of them stink. And it's not always the fact of how the author writes, or the cover, or what they're saying, or the design, or how it flows. It could be anything. But one thing you have to decide early on, not right away, but at some point, is what kind of format works with your personality and your resources and your experience. There's an old saying that if you're a brand new expert, people might not respect you. If you're a brand new chiropractor, it's your first year, you want to have a book done, you might not have a lot of experience as a chiropractor. Well, as you know, Napoleon Hill was not a hugely successful businessman when he wrote Think and Grow Rich. He went out and interviewed the top minds of the planet to develop that book. So you're either an expert, professional, authority in your field, or you're not. And if you're not, take heart, because you can put so much content in a book supporting your message that it won't matter. You could be the next Dale Carnegie or Napoleon Hill and be basically a reporter who's compiled a lot of information, a lot of case studies to support your concept and your perspective on the topic that you're writing about. So that's the first thing about who you are and your personality. You're either a reporter or you're an established expert. Now, what kind of format would you like for your book? Would you like an author's lessons? Here's the lessons I learned from this. Here's how I got rich. Here's what happened to me. Or the journey you took from being, the Rich Dad Poor Dad journey, how he went from being a kid in Hawaii and worked his way up the ladder. Or perhaps a business journal. Here's the systems in place in business, and here's what I've garnered, and here's what I've crafted from other businesses. Or perhaps the interview format. Why I Want You to Be Rich was an almost unedited transcript from Kiyosaki and Trump. If you read that book, it's a good book, but oh my gosh, they just interviewed each other, and it sounded like they took those transcripts and put it in a book, very quickly made. Or could it be a fable format? These are really popular with my friend Greg Reed. He actually writes stories to make a point. The book Who Moved My Cheese was a story about little mice and somebody moved their cheese, but it's a story that supported a really important point that the author was making, but he did it in a fable format. So any of these formats work. Doesn't matter which one you choose. The only thing that matters is how it fits your personality, your experience, and of course the resources you bring to bear when it comes to case studies and other people you can bring into the book. Organizing your content. We're going to get to writing here in a second. So after you've worked on perhaps an outline to craft your message, and a really good table of contents, because that's going to be part marketing and part content. You're going to want to compile stuff before you start your interviews. You're going to want to collect some other research, some other opinions, some blogs perhaps, notes, any articles you've previously written. A lot of stuff should go into a big folder, and I like using a mind map here to organize and basically collect all of your thoughts, ideas, concepts, even pictures and graphs to support what you're going to put into this book. And when you go to engaging your fan base before you write what you're going to do and start building your tribe, ask them to supply stuff as well. You'd be amazed how much free research you can get for your potential readers out there just by asking. Let's get to it. Interviewing and transcribing, relating to your journalist. What you're going to want to do when you get this all set up, you've got your theme set up, your perspective, your outline, you're all ready to go. You've got a journalist. We talked about hiring a journalist in your previous module. You are going to schedule your interviews within a 2-week period. If you go longer than 2 weeks, it's sometimes hard to get people's schedules aligned, I know that, but if you can do your interviews every day or every other day for a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, you'll have consistency. You'll be able to keep your pace flowing in your interviews, and your memory will be sharper, and it'll go quicker, you'll save money. So just try to keep a specific schedule. Try to incorporate all of your interviews. I generally do a chapter in an hour with a client, and for an 8 or 10 chapter book, we get the interviews done in about 8 to 10 hours. Sometimes a little longer. We'll go off tangent. We do a lot of work obviously in the beginning, because you see the first 3 modules we did here. So I may spend 2 hours to 2 days setting up these interviews by getting the right positioning and the platform set up with the client before we actually do the book. But the actual interview for the book, scheduled out for no less than, I would say no less than a week and no more than 2. Somewhere in that range would be good. If your plan veers off track, that might happen within the context of your interviews. There have been at least 2 cases I can recall where we did all the positioning, we got the theme out, we discussed what the book was going to be about, we got excited about it, we worked on titles, we hired a designer to work on the cover right away, and we started the interviews. On interview 3, we got off topic. And when we got off topic, the topic got better and better and better. And within about the next 2 or 3 hours of interviews, the client and I realized we had a brand new book here. So what we did was we said, listen, this is the book we should be doing first. There's some specific strategies about what you should do first and what you should do second and third for your book. You're going to all have a book series. No one's going to have just one book out there. Everybody's got more than one in them. And what we decided to do was, you know what, this second book that you're talking about makes more sense to be your first. We'll keep the previous interviews for your second book, but let's go ahead and shift direction here because it felt right. And because from a standpoint of launching his brand, it made more sense. It was an evergreen book that had a lot more appeal from a generic standpoint as opposed to a second book, which is more specific. So if it goes off track, don't worry about that. Just be prepared for it because it can happen. As you do your interviews, and it's really important, after your first interview is done, send it to your transcriptionist immediately. Do not wait for the 2 weeks to send those off. Do them one at a time, of course, but don't wait to batch them up and send them all to your transcriptionist. That will take a lot longer than doing them right away. And when you do that, you'll get your transcription back within a day or so. Send that to your writer, your ghostwriter, immediately and say, start working on my very first chapter. He should already have your outline and your positioning statement previously to this, but now you're going to want him to start on your book right away. What happens now is that you'll have your chapter and perhaps your introduction and chapter done by the time you're 4th, 5th, or maybe by the time you're done with your interviews, but you'll have overlapped all these processes and save yourself a ton of time. When you give this to your writer, if they're allowing it, because some of them don't want to hear it, but some of them will, give them your audio transcript in addition to your text transcript. When they can hear your voice, it might help them craft the message when they're actually writing for you. They'll get the pace, the voice, and your style. So once you've taken that manuscript and only worked on that first sample chapter, you'll have something to go on. You'll have something you can talk to with your writer. Say, yes, I like what you've done here. I don't like what you've done here. massage and work on that first chapter, and we'll talk about how to go full bore on the entire manuscript after this. When you go to create your content and get your book written, there's a strange thing here. The cartoon sums up quite nicely about being patient, learning to be patient, and I want to be patient now. Be patient with yourself. If your ideas aren't gelling, if you're feeling like, no, I've got this book in me, but I can't get the ideas out, be patient with yourself. Talk to somebody. Call me. Talk to a friend. Talk to a mentor. Tell them your idea. Tell them you're stuck. And don't be ashamed of that. Just say, listen, I've got this really cool idea for a book, but it's just not feeling right. It's not gelling. Work on that before you engage your journalist and your writer. Make sure you are well positioned before you get into this. Get relevant feedback. Once you get all that feedback, once you are on task to get rolling, move quickly. Get your interviews done in 2 weeks and get going on your book. In the next module, we'll talk about how to edit that and how to make it a compelling book, a real page turner, even in the nonfiction world. All right, this concludes this module. If you're not already a member of our membership program, please go to Author Your Brand right now and see about joining us. We'd love to have you. Thanks.